An underwater camera captured terrifying creatures in one of America's oldest wells.
Jesus, what is that?
A well looks like a simple thing. A hole in the ground, water at the bottom, a bucket to bring it up. But an old well is something else. It is a sealed column of black water. It has sat under the same patch of ground for more than 160 years. No sunlight reaches it. Almost nothing disturbs it. And it is not empty. A man stood over one of these wells with a camera tied to a rope. He was hoping for gold coins, old rifles, or bones. He lowered the camera into the dark and waited. What came back on his screen was moving. The hole behind the house. The well sits behind a house that is older than the Civil War. The family who lived here dug it more than 160 years ago. It is lined with stone from the top all the way down. It drops straight through the dirt for a long way. About 3/4 of the way down, the walls turn to solid rock. At the very bottom sits the water. It looks maybe 6 to 8 feet deep. Someone bolted a windmill and a pump on top much later. That part is newer. The patent stamp on the metal reads 1921. The wind would spin the blades and work the pump. Water rose out of the well and ran downhill to a barn. It was a clever little setup for a farm with no power. But the pump is not the interesting part. The well underneath is the old part. Before the pump, they pulled water up the hard way, with a bucket and a rope. A flat rock covers the mouth of the well. The owner keeps it there on purpose. Without it, raccoons and possums wander over and fall in. They drown and they spoil the water below. So the rock stays put, year after year. The man slides the rock back and shines a light down. Far below, the beam catches the water and it shines back. It is a long way down. He can feel cool air rising out of the shaft. Then he ties a small camera to a rope and lets it out. The rope goes down and down and down. The light at the top shrinks to the size of a coin. Then it is just a dot. The camera swings on the rope as it drops. Its little light slides down the stone, ring after ring of old rock. Then the walls fall away. The tight shaft opens into a wider space near the water. For a second, it does not look like a well at all. It looks like a room. That guess would pull him back here later. He half expects to find treasure. Old farms hid things in wells for generations. People dropped in coins, tools, even guns. So he watches the little screen, hoping for a glint of gold. The screen shows stone, then more stone, then water. The camera touches the surface and slips under. And in the water, something shifts. It is small. It is pale. And it moves on its own.
It is gonna be great. So we can't trust this.
How they dug it. Building a well like this was brutal, dangerous work. A man climbed down into the hole with a shovel and a bucket. A second man stayed up top with a rope. One dug at the bottom. The other hauled the dirt and rock to the surface. They sank the shaft foot by foot in the dark, with the walls pressing in. The biggest danger was the ground caving in. Loose earth could collapse and bury the digger alive, so they lined the shaft with stone as they went. Each rock was set by hand, in a tight ring, holding back the earth. That stone lining is why these old wells still stand, long after the diggers are gone. The second danger could not be seen at all. Bad air pools at the bottom of a deep hole. The oxygen thins out and other gases settle in. Men climbed down feeling fine and passed out with no warning. Some never came back up. Diggers had a grim name for it. They called it choke damp. It was heavier than fresh air and had no smell. A candle would gutter and die, and that was the only warning. Wise crews lowered a lit lantern first. If the flame went out, no man climbed down. For most of American history, every well was made this slow way. Until 1808, almost nobody could drill for water. If you wanted it, you dug for it by hand. A whole farm lived or died on whether that hole found water. A good well could serve a family for 100 years. Children grew up hauling from it by hand. Then the family left, or a pump arrived, and the hole was forgotten. But the water never left, and neither did what lived in it. Some of these wells reached shocking depths. The largest one ever built by hand sits in Greensburg, Kansas. It is 109 feet deep and 32 feet wide. The stone walls are 2 feet thick. Crews dug the whole thing in the late 1880s with picks, shovels, and a rope. Stand at the bottom today, and the floor sinks straight into the water table. That last part is the key. The water table. It is the layer of water sitting under the ground almost everywhere. It hides in the cracks and gaps of the rock, out of sight. A well is just a straw pushed down into it. When the digger finally hit water, he had not found a puddle. He had opened a door into a hidden sea that runs for miles under the fields. That water is always creeping along, a few inches a day. A single drop can spend years down there before it reaches the light, and that hidden sea is not lifeless. The trap. A well is a perfect trap, and it never stops working. The stone rim stays cool and damp, even in the heat of summer. Frogs feel that damp and hop toward it. Snakes follow the frogs. Salamanders crawl in from the wet grass around the base. One by one, they reach the edge. Then they slip and fall. Getting back out is almost impossible. The walls are smooth, wet stone. The wet stone gives nothing to hold. A frog cannot leap out of open water. It just sinks back down every time it tries. So it swims. It swims along the wall, hunting for a way up that is not there. Then it tires. Some of them drown, but many do not, at least not for a while. Insects fall in by the thousands, all summer long. A trapped frog eats them. A trapped salamander eats them. Beetles, moths, spiders, and worms tumble down the shaft and land on the water. The well turns into a feeding station that stocks itself from above. You can smell an old well before you ever see into it. It breathes out a damp, green, rotten air from the water below. That smell is the trap working. It is the smell of 100 years of things that fell in. Then the bigger animals arrive. A raccoon leans in too far and slips. A possum falls in at night and cannot climb out. They thrash, they tire, and they sink. That is the exact reason the owner weighs the lid down with a heavy rock. Snakes learn these wells too. A cool shaft full of frogs is an easy meal. Some slide in on purpose and then cannot get back out. So the trap catches the hunter along with the hunted. Give it a few years, and something strange takes shape in the dark. A small, closed food chain, sealed off from the world. Bugs feed the frogs. Frogs and drowned animals feed whatever is hungrier than they are. Nothing up top can see it. Nothing down there ever leaves. It is a private little world running in total blackness. At the very bottom lies a soft layer of what did not make it. Bones, shells, and black mud built up over 100 years, and it runs on everything unlucky enough to fall in. The things with no eyes. The trapped frogs are not the frightening part. The frightening part lives deeper, and it was born in the dark. Below about 30 feet, the water changes. It never warms. It never sees light, and it is full of animals built for exactly that. Most of them are tiny. Pale amphipods and isopods drift through the water. None are bigger than a grain of rice. The water is so clear it looks like glass, and it can hold thousands of them. They have no color at all. Color is useless in water that never sees the sun. Bigger things live down there too. In many regions, cave crayfish creep across the rock. They are ghost white and nearly still. Some live for decades in the same stretch of dark water. They move like they have all the time in the world. They do. In the wet south, a well can hold something much bigger. The Amphiuma is a salamander shaped like a thick, dark eel. It can grow more than 3 feet long. It has 4 tiny, useless legs and a bite that draws blood. Catch one in a light, coiled in the water, and it looks like a snake that should not exist. The blind salamanders are the ones that stay with you. The grotto salamander is the strangest. It is born up near the light with working eyes. Then, as it grows, its eyelids seal shut. The eyes sink back into its skull and quit for good. The adult is pale pink, blind, and feels its way through black water for life. Others never had eyes to lose. The Texas blind salamander is white, thin, and eyeless from birth. It has red feathery gills and long, ghostly legs. Its body gave up on sight ages ago because sight was never any use. The Georgia blind salamander lives the same way, deep in the water under the state. These animals barely eat at all. Food is rare in the cold dark, so their bodies nearly stop. Some can go a year between meals. They are in no hurry to do anything but wait. That slowness is why they last. A body that barely moves barely needs to eat. In the dark, patience is the whole plan. These are not creatures from some faraway cave on another continent. They live in the water table. It is the same water table an old farm well taps into. Scientists mostly find them by accident. When a pump pulls hard on a deep well, these pale things come up with the water. On a screen, they are easy to miss at first. A pale streak, a flick of movement in the beam. Then it turns, and you see it has no eyes. That is the world a camera sinks into at the bottom of an old well. A cold, blind, ancient one, hiding a few feet under a quiet backyard. What else the camera finds creatures are only half of what the dark water holds. Old wells are also keepers of things, and they keep them far too well. The water at the bottom is cold, still, and low on oxygen. That is the exact mix that stops things from rotting. Wood, cloth, glass, and bone can sit down there for centuries and barely change. An old well is an accidental time capsule. At Thomas Jefferson's Monticello, workers once dug out an old well that had been filled in. Inside, they found fine plates from the 1760s, stacked and nearly whole. They found glass bottles still holding cherries, grapes, and cranberries. Some of the fruit was still whole after 200 years underground. The cold groundwater had frozen a single afternoon in time. Divers who work old wells have brought up stranger things. Leather boots, coins green with age, animal skulls picked clean. Some wells give up cannonballs and old musket parts. That is exactly the kind of prize the farmer was dreaming about. That is why explorers drop cameras down these shafts in the first place. They pull up old bottles, tools, coins, and horseshoes. They find the bones of animals that fell in and never got out. Every object is a piece of a story nobody bothered to write down. A lost ring, a child's marble, a rusted key to a door that no longer stands. Some wells held things on purpose. A dry well made an easy hiding place. People threw down what they wanted gone, and the dark kept the secret. Over the years, searchers have lowered cameras into old wells and found more than junk. In more than a few cases, wells have turned into crime scenes. A deep stone hole is a hard place to search. It is an easy place to forget. That is what makes it useful to the wrong kind of person. The man on the rope hoped for gold and old gun barrels. What most old wells actually hold is quieter and stranger than treasure. A slow, sealed record of everything that ever fell in. And everything someone wanted, gone. Going down. After the camera came back up, the man had one clear thought. He wanted to go down there himself. The footage was not sharp, but it showed something. The shaft looked like it opened up near the bottom. It almost looked like a small room cut into the rock. So he started talking about ropes and climbing gear and going in. That plan is far more dangerous than it sounds. The first threat is the air. The same bad air that killed old well diggers is still down there. Carbon dioxide is heavier than fresh air, so it settles at the bottom. A person can climb down, grow dizzy, and pass out in minutes. Nobody up top would even know why. The second threat is the water and the cold. Even 6 feet of water is enough to drown in if you fall wrong. The walls are slick with slime. The old stone is loose in places after 160 years. One handhold can pull free in your grip, and people really do fall into these wells. In 1987, a baby girl named Jessica McClure fell into an open well pipe in Texas. She was only 18 months old. She was trapped underground for 58 hours. Rescuers had to drill a second shaft beside her to reach her. The whole country watched because everyone understood the fear. A hole in the ground had swallowed a child. She was one of the lucky ones. Most people pulled from these holes are not. Rescue crews have a hard rule about them. More than half the people who die in a pit like this were trying to save someone else. The bad air takes the first person. Then it takes the second, who climbed in to help. So the man stood at the top, staring down at his own footage. The dark water was waiting a few feet below. Whatever slid past that camera was still there. And the smart move was to leave it exactly where it was. The world under the farm. This one well is not rare at all. Millions like it sit across the country. Every old farm had one. Every abandoned homestead left one behind. Most are forgotten now. Many are not even capped. Each of those holes is a straw pushed into the same buried sea of water. And that water is alive from one end of the continent to the other. The blind salamanders, the colorless shrimp, the ghost crayfish. They are not freaks in one strange spot. They are a whole hidden world spread out under our feet that almost nobody studies. Scientists still name brand new species from this water every year. Whole kinds of animals seen for the first time, pulled from a farm well or a cave stream. We have mapped the surface of the moon in fine detail. The living water under our own feet we have barely touched. It is also older than it looks. People have been digging wells in America for a very long time. The oldest one ever found sits in New Mexico. It was dug by hand around 11,500 BC. That is more than 13,000 years ago. Some of the first people on the continent made it. They needed water in a dry land, so they dug down to it. It was the same thing that farmer did behind his house. The animals in the dark are older still. They have been breeding down there, blind, for longer than any country has existed. They were there before the well. They were there before the house. They will be there long after both are gone. Odds are good an old well sits somewhere near you right now, under a field, behind a barn, lost in the trees. Capped or open, it still reaches the same dark water. And that water is still busy, whether anyone watches or not. The man lowered a camera into that stone shaft looking for treasure. He thought the story was gold, or rifles, or a hidden room. He was wrong about the prize. But he was right that something was down there. What he really found was a door. Under a great deal of old American ground, the water is not empty. It watches nothing because it cannot see, and it has never once been alone.